Psychic soldiers under Project Stargate. Back in the early 1970s, it was rumoured that the Soviet Union had begun spending around 60 million rubles a year on the study of psychic abilities and remote viewing, the ability to see locations far away via astral projection, on a project known as psychotronic research. In fear that the Soviet Union had learned of a new form of spiritual technology, the United States quickly funded and established Project Stargate, of which had the express purpose to also study the remote viewing phenomenon and use psychic soldiers as a method of retrieving information of captured prisoners of war, high-value targets, terrorist organizations, and preventable attacks. Research into remote viewing would begin back in 1972 at the Stanford Research Institute located out of Menlo Park in the state of California. The lead researchers, Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff, required a minimum accuracy of greater than 65% statistical success before an individual could be accepted into the research study, with claims that many of the participants far exceeded this percentage but were not always 100% accurate with their guesses. Shortly after the project began, the team was able to locate a lost Soviet spy plane in 1976 by psychic participant Rosemary Smith, as well as additional claims of recovered POWs and high-value targets over the years. By 1995, however, given the advancements made in satellite and surveillance technology, Project Stargate was cancelled under CIA administration that believed the project to have been nothing more than a scam to receive funding, with claims that the accuracy behind the group's findings were attributed to independent detective work done outside of the research group's efforts. Despite the large amount of evidence of the project's success and findings in the psychic realm, the CIA holds the belief that the alleged psychic technique was of dubious value and lacked the concreteness and reliability necessary for it to be used as a basis for making decisions or taking action. The final report found reason to suspect that in some well-publicized cases of dramatic hits, the remote viewers might have had substantially more background information than might otherwise be apparent. Height 611 UFO Incident. During the reign of the Soviet Union, there was a tremendous amount of sightings and UFO incidents that were cast aside and forgotten about due to the fact that the government of the Soviet Union worked tirelessly to hide evidence of extraterrestrials from its citizens in fear of its people discovering that there were higher powers that extended beyond the power and control of the Soviet Union. Because of this, many of these incidents are not well known even amongst dedicated members and researchers of the alien community. One of these such events was the Height 611 UFO incident that occurred back in 1986 on the 29th of January in the small town of Dalnogorsk. According to the residents of the town, a strange reddish orb of a massive size was spotted at around 8 p.m. that had passed over the town. This reddish orb was described as being half as large as the moon overhead and to have appeared to have been similar in colour and luminescence to that of a dark red flame. Eyewitnesses also noted that as the object flew parallel to the ground, it made no noise of any kind as it passed over something that seemed impossible to accomplish with even the most advanced aircraft imaginable. Using specified witness timeframes and the flight path of the object, investigators calculated that the orb flew at approximately 34 miles per hour and that it was flying roughly 700 to 800 meters above the ground. As the object continued its flight path overhead, it suddenly began descending quickly and crashed into the side of the mountains located near the town. Oddly enough, every witness reported that not only did the object crash into the side of the mountain and appear to have exploded or spread temporarily as a natural wildfire before dissipating and completely disappearing, but that as it crashed, it made no sound whatsoever, which is a feat that is impossible to accomplish regardless of any advancements made in flight capabilities, as it seems to defy the fundamental laws of physics themselves. Further investigation yielded interesting results, as some rocks at the impact site had drops of lead that had previously been molten before solidifying on the rocks in the cold. Not only this, but rare earth metals were also recovered in the vicinity that were not naturally found in any types of deposits on the mountain previously. Unfortunately, the pictures taken by the investigators at the time, when later developed, turned out to be blank. almost as if they had been swapped out entirely and replaced with fresh film in an effort to cover up the evidence gathered at the location of impact. The official explanation provided by the Soviet Union at the time was that a meteorite had recently impacted the site and was the cause of the strange findings of the rare earth metals and strange chemical composites. However, the provided explanation had failed to explain the eyewitness accounts of the event, as well as the fact that sightings of strange red orbs landing on the mountainside would continue at the site over the next few years. Aurora, Texas UFO incident. It was almost dawn on April 17, 1897, when inhabitants of a rural American town saw a single alien spacecraft lose control over the skies of Texas. A young boy saw an airship trailing smoke as it headed north toward the town of Aurora, slowing and speeding as it tried to regain control over its trajectory. It sailed over the public square, reaching the northern part of the town where it clipped the edge of a windmill at speed, then veering into the path of the town's water tower where, upon contact, blew into a number of pieces, large and small, in a terrific explosion, scattering debris over several acres of ground and awakening many of the town's residents. The residents that awoke went to investigate the source of their early wake-up call. What they found would astound and stupefy the townspeople. Having read about numerous mystery airships in national newspapers recently, including an abduction attempt, they wondered if this was something not only extraterrestrial, but also nefarious in nature. On locating the ship's sole occupant, although the pilot was dead and disfigured from the crash, they soon realized that he was clearly not an inhabitant of this world. Furthermore, strange markings in the manner of hieroglyphic characters were seen on the internal control panel. Terrified of the unknown, the townspeople hurriedly buried the body in the local cemetery, and removing the wreckage in the hope that the incident would disappear from the town's history. But that would not be the end of this. Some decades later, an investigative reporter wanted to find out once and for all the facts behind this extraterrestrial cover-up. The investigator began with trying to locate the remains of the spacecraft itself. One Aurora resident interviewed claimed the whole thing was a fabrication, maintaining there had never been a windmill for the craft to collide with in that town. It turns out there was no windmill to be seen. However, further investigations revealed the remains of a windmill base were found. Was this Aurora resident still continuing the cover-up all these years after? More was added to the mystery, as the nearby site of the old windmill was a deep well. A sweep of the well would reveal metals in the water itself, some elements such as aluminium and silver, but others that were unidentifiable in this planet's periodic table. Could this water well be where the spacecraft's parts had been dumped back in 1897? The presence of metals surprised the well's owner. However, he disclosed that having started using the well, he began to feel pains in his joints and soon diagnosed with early onset arthritis that could be associated with contaminated water. With the location of the spacecraft possibly found, the investigator moved to locate the extraterrestrial pilot. He went to the Aurora Cemetery, and ground-penetrating radar and photos from prior visits brought to light an unmarked grave in an area near other burials from the 1890s. He discovered a grave marker and headstone that seemed to show a spacecraft of some sort, as well as faint readings from his metal detector again. This was surely the conclusive evidence he was looking for. After putting the pieces together, the investigator returned to the town, looking to ask for permission from the Cemetery Association to perform an exhumation, and to conduct a more major operation of retrieving the spacecraft's pieces from the well. Not only did the Cemetery Association refuse his request, but upon returning to the site to take photos, not only had the grave marker mysteriously disappeared, but the metal readings now showed nothing. Returning to the well, the investigator had a feeling he knew what he'd find. The metal detector now also didn't pick up anything either. The UFO landing in Aurora, Texas would remain an unexplained mystery. Hudson Valley UFO sightings. New York's Hudson River Valley has been a UFO hotspot for years, with countless reports of strange phenomena in the area. Thousands of residents between 1983 and 1986 claimed they had witnessed a large metallic object hovering in the sky. Dennis Sant had worked for the local government for 17 years. On March 17, 1983, while Dennis was at home in Brewster, New York, he spotted something in the sky, describing it as an exceptionally large object. The structure was dark grey, metallic, and was almost silent. The lights were bright as they stood out in the sky, looking like a city of lights. It just paused in the sky. As the object started to move, Dennis Sant expressed a feeling of fright. The thought of how this is moving and who is moving it. A thought of an encounter with something extraterrestrial. Dennis wasn't the only one witnessing such an extraordinary event, however. Just a few miles away on Interstate 84, traffic came to a standstill as commuters left their vehicles in order to catch a glimpse of the same mystery craft. The phenomena that had occurred that night would return after a week had passed. Officer Andy Sadoff of the Newcastle Police was on routine patrol when he also claimed to have witnessed the craft. He stated, "As I set up doing some routine checks looking for speeding cars, I looked up to the sky and saw a series of lights. At first it looked like a plane, quite far away. However, it was very large. The lights were made up of white and green. It approached my vehicle and paused in its tracks and just hovered above." He described a feeling of amazement and awe. Unknowing of the object, but knowing this wasn't something of Earth. With no noise, no sound, no engine, this object was completely silent. It was triangular in shape and was as large as a football field. At the same time Officer Andy Sadoff was looking up at the UFO, another eyewitness report came in. Ed Burns, a computer engineer, was on his way home, commuting along the Taconic Parkway around 10 miles north of Andy Sadoff's location. Ed pulled off the road and joined a group of around 20 other motorists who had also stopped in amazement. Ed and Officer Andy were joined by thousands of other witnesses who all claimed to have seen the same phenomena. Since the thousands of reports which came in throughout the 1980s, there have been countless more ever since, making the Hudson Valley one of the USA's hotspots for UFOs.